In just 26 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors would find himself in a verbal war that would end with security being called and a dramatic exit that left the studio audience in stunned silence. What started as promotional appearances for Tom Hardy's latest project quickly devolved into a character assassination attempt that backfired spectacularly, revealing the true nature of daytime television's most controversial host. The tension was palpable from the moment Tom Hardy walked onto the View set last night. Joy Behar's opening introduction carried an edge that seasoned talk show watchers immediately recognized as trouble brewing. Her smile seemed forced, her tone clipped, and there was something in her eyes that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical celebrity promotional segment that audiences expected. Well, Joy began, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. We have Tom Hardy here today, another one of those British actors who seems to think they can just waltz into Hollywood and lecture Americans about how we should live our lives. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably as Hardy's jaw visibly tightened. He had clearly expected to discuss his new film, not face an immediate character assault. Hardy, maintaining his characteristic composure, responded with measured restraint. I'm sorry, Joy, but I think there might be some confusion here. I'm here to talk about my new project, not to lecture anyone about anything. His British accent seemed to thicken slightly, a telltale sign that he was already on edge. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, sensing the unusual hostility emanating from their colleague. But Joy wasn't backing down. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she prepared to launch her next attack. Oh, there's no confusion, Tom. We've all seen your interviews where you've criticized American foreign policy, American gun laws, American everything really. So tell me, what gives you the right to come here and profit from our entertainment industry while simultaneously trashing our country? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Hardy's publicist, sitting just off camera, could be seen frantically gesturing, but it was too late. The damage was done, and Hardy's expression had shifted from polite confusion to genuine anger. I've never criticized America as a country, he said, his voice remaining level but carrying an unmistakable edge. I've participated in discussions about global issues, which is what actors are often asked to do, but I've never trashed anyone's country. Joy scoffed, a sound that seemed to echo through the studio with particular venom. Oh, please, spare us the diplomatic double talk. You Hollywood types are all the same. You make millions here, and then go back to your little tea parties and mock us behind our backs. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with several people looking toward the exits as if they wished they could escape the escalating confrontation. That's completely untrue and, frankly, insulting, Hardy replied, his composure beginning to crack. I have nothing but respect for American audiences and the opportunities I've been given here. But I'm not going to sit here and be ambushed with false accusations. His hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrests of his chair, were now gripping them tightly enough that his knuckles were turning white. The other co-hosts attempted to intervene, with Whoopi Goldberg trying to steer the conversation back to safer territory. Tom, let's talk about your new film, she began, but Joy cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. No, Whoopi. I think our audience deserves to know who they're really supporting when they buy tickets to his movies, Joy snapped, her voice rising in pitch and intensity. This is exactly the kind of Hollywood hypocrisy that's destroying our culture. These foreign actors come here, make their fortunes, and then turn around and bite the hand that feeds them. Hardy's eyes flashed with genuine anger now. You're putting words in my mouth that I've never said and attributing motives to me that don't exist. This is exactly the kind of divisive rhetoric that's actually damaging to meaningful discourse. His accent was becoming more pronounced as his emotions heightened, and the famous Hardy intensity that served him so well in his film roles was now directed squarely at his host. Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk, clearly pleased that she had gotten under his skin. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. The mask is coming off, isn't it? Show us that famous temper of yours, Tom. Let America see what you really think of us. The provocation was deliberate and calculated, designed to push Hardy past his breaking point. The studio audience sat in shocked silence as they witnessed what was supposed to be a light-hearted promotional interview transform into something far more sinister. Even the camera operators seemed uncertain about whether they should continue filming or cut away from the increasingly volatile situation. But what Joy Behar didn't anticipate was that Tom Hardy wasn't just any Hollywood actor who would crumble under her attack. He was a man with extensive training in handling difficult situations, someone who had faced far more intimidating opponents than a talk show host with a vendetta. As the confrontation reached its peak, it became clear that Joy had severely underestimated her opponent, and the tables were about to turn in a way that would leave her completely exposed and utterly humiliated before millions of viewers. Hardy took a deep breath, his military training from his younger days kicking in as he prepared to systematically dismantle Joy's attack. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but carried the kind of authority that commanded immediate attention. "Joy, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say," he began, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers with laser-like intensity. "You've made several factual errors in your accusations, and I'm going to correct each one." Joy's smirk faltered slightly as she realized the dynamic had shifted. This wasn't the defensive, flustered celebrity she had expected to bully into submission. This was a man who had spent years preparing for roles that required him to embody strength under pressure, and that preparation was now being weaponized against her. "First," Hardy continued, his voice gaining strength, "you claimed I criticized American foreign policy. What I actually did was participate in a panel discussion about PTSD among veterans, where I shared my research experience playing military characters. I spoke about the need for better mental health support for soldiers returning from combat. If you consider advocating for veteran care to be criticism, then perhaps you should examine your own priorities." The studio audience began to murmur, and Joy's expression hardened as she realized her carefully planned ambush was backfiring spectacularly. She attempted to interrupt, but Hardy raised his hand with such commanding authority that she actually fell silent. "Second," he pressed on relentlessly, "you mentioned gun laws. I was asked a direct question by a journalist about my experience training with firearms for film roles, and I gave an honest answer about safety protocols on movie sets. I never once commented on American legislation or policy. You've either deliberately misrepresented my words, or you're working from completely false information." By now, the other co-hosts were watching in fascination as their colleague was methodically destroyed by someone she had underestimated. Whoopi Goldberg's eyebrows were raised in apparent admiration for Hardy's composed but devastating response. Joy, clearly rattled but too proud to back down, made her fatal mistake. "Well, maybe you didn't say those exact words, but we all know what people like you really think about America. You come here with your fancy accents and your arrogant attitudes." "People like me?" Hardy interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than if he had shouted. "What exactly do you mean by people like me, Joy? Are you referring to actors, British citizens, or are you making assumptions based on something else entirely?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Joy had walked directly into a trap of her own making, and everyone in the studio could sense it. Her face flushed red as she realized the implication of her words, but her ego wouldn't let her retreat. "I mean, Hollywood elites who think they're better than regular Americans," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction now. Hardy leaned forward slightly, his presence somehow filling the entire space despite remaining seated. "Joy, I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in London. My father was a painter and decorator. My mother worked in accounts. I've been homeless. I've struggled with addiction. I've worked construction jobs to pay rent. The only thing that separates me from regular Americans, as you put it, is that I happen to find success in a profession that you're now trying to vilify me for." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the production crew had stopped moving, transfixed by what was unfolding before them. Joy's carefully constructed attack had not only failed, but had exposed her own prejudices and assumptions in the most public way possible. But Hardy wasn't finished. "What's really happening here, Joy, is that you invited me onto your show under false pretenses. You told my representatives this would be a discussion about my new film and my upcoming charity work with veteran organizations. Instead, you've attempted to ambush me with fabricated controversies and personal attacks. The question viewers should be asking themselves is why?" Joy's composure was completely shattered now. Sweat was visible on her forehead under the studio lights, and her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped her note cards. We ask tough questions here. That's what we do. No, Joy, Hardy replied with devastating calm. Tough questions are about policy, about choices, about facts. What you've done here is character assassination based on lies and assumptions. There's a significant difference, and frankly, your audience deserves better. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, a sound that seemed to physically wound Joy as she sat there, thoroughly defeated and exposed. But as the applause died down, it became clear that this confrontation was far from over, and Joy's desperation was about to drive her to make one final, catastrophic mistake. Joy's face twisted with rage and humiliation as she watched Hardy command the respect of her own audience. Unable to accept defeat gracefully, she made the decision that would seal her fate and provide the dramatic conclusion that millions of viewers would replay for years to come. You know what? Joy snarled, her voice cracking with emotion as she abandoned all pretense of professionalism. I don't give a damn about your sob story background. You're still just another pretty boy actor who thinks he can come on my show and make me look stupid. Well, fuck that, and fuck you. The gasps from the audience were audible as Joy's mask of television respectability completely disintegrated. Her co-host sat frozen in shock, and even the seasoned production crew seemed stunned by what they had just witnessed. Joy had not only used profanity on live television, but she had revealed the petty, vindictive person behind the public persona. Hardy's response was swift and devastating in its simplicity. He stood up slowly, his imposing 5'9" frame somehow seeming to tower over the seated panel. And there it is, he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen the real Joy Behar. Not the television personality, not the political commentator, but the person who invites guests onto her show for the sole purpose of trying to humiliate them for her own entertainment. Joy scrambled to regain control, but it was far too late. Now wait, just a damn minute, she began, but Hardy cut her off with a gesture that brooked no argument. No, Joy, you've said quite enough. You've shown your audience exactly who you are and what this show really represents. You've lied about my words, attacked my character, made xenophobic assumptions, and when confronted with the truth, your response was to swear at me like a petulant child having a tantrum. The studio was now in complete chaos. Producers were frantically signaling from off-camera, trying to regain control of their rapidly imploding show. Joy's co-hosts were attempting to fade into their chairs, clearly wanting no part of the disaster their colleague had created. But Hardy wasn't finished delivering his final blow. What's particularly disgusting is that you do this for entertainment. You invite people onto your show, lie to them about the format, ambush them with false accusations, all so you can create viral moments and boost your ratings. You're not a journalist, Joy. You're not even an entertainer. You're a bully with a microphone, and you've just shown everyone exactly what that looks like. Joy's face was now crimson with rage and shame. She stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward and nearly toppling over. How dare you come on my show and— Your show? Hardy laughed, a sound devoid of humor. This isn't your show, Joy. This show belongs to the network, the producers, your co-hosts, and ultimately, the viewers. And based on their reaction today, I think they've seen enough of the real you to make their own judgments about whether this is the kind of content they want to support. The audience, as if on cue, began applauding again. But this time it was sustained and powerful. People were standing now, showing their clear support for Hardy and their obvious disgust with Joy's behavior. The sound of their approval seemed to drain the last of Joy's fight out of her. Security personnel had appeared at the edge of the stage, clearly summoned by the production team as the situation had spiraled completely out of control. But Hardy raised a hand toward them, indicating he wasn't a threat, just a man who was ready to leave. I came here today to talk about a film and a charity, Hardy said, his voice now carrying easily over the chaos as he commanded absolute attention. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination attempt based on lies and prejudice. I won't be part of this anymore. He turned toward Joy, who was now visibly shaking with emotion. Joy, I genuinely hope you get the help you need to deal with whatever anger and bitterness is driving this behavior. But I won't be your victim, and I won't enable your bullying by pretending this was acceptable." With that, Tom Hardy walked calmly toward the exit, his head held high and his dignity intact. As he reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time to the audience members who came here expecting entertainment and instead witnessed this display. "I apologize. You deserved better, and you should demand better from the people who claim to represent you on television." Joy, left standing alone at her panel while her co-host sat in stunned silence, seemed to finally realize the magnitude of what had just happened. The applause continued as Hardy disappeared backstage, leaving behind a studio full of people who had just witnessed one of the most spectacular implosions in talk show history. The cameras continued rolling as Joy stood there, her career and reputation in ruins, the victim of her own venom and cruelty. She had gotten exactly what she deserved, and everyone knew it. The show that was supposed to showcase her power had instead revealed her weakness, pettiness, and complete lack of professionalism. As the credits began to roll prematurely, and the audience continued their ovation for the man who had just schooled one of daytime television's most notorious bullies, one thing was crystal clear. Tom Hardy had not only survived Joy Behar's ambush, he had turned it into her public execution. The confrontation that was meant to destroy him had instead destroyed her, and the entire world had watched it happen in real time.